So California's being California, and now California has entered the talks of artificial intelligence. And how do we keep people safer? When I was in law school, there was really two sides of the spectrum when it came to states and how they imputed laws, enacted regulations into businesses, into people's everyday lives. Texas was on one side, California was on the other. Texas, less is more. California, more is better. And I don't want to impute any bias, but there seems to be bipartisan support against what California is doing. And let's talk about their new California's SB 1047 bill. And this dangers of California and the bill. I want to talk about it. So what's going on? Well, regulations around AI isn't anything new. This is the Council of State Governments, and everybody across the board, at least 17 states have enacted 29 bills across, again, like Texas has, California has, but it's more about transparency. It's more about the disclosure of what these artificial intelligence are doing and just keeping an eye on what risk is. And that's exactly as well what EU has done with the EU AI Act. It categorizes different models and forms of risk, and based on that type of risk profile is how much you need to disclose. But it doesn't go to the lengths that, and we'll go into this article, but let's look at the actual bill. And I want to read some. It's not the most interesting type of verbiage to read any of these bills, but let's look at it. So the bill would enact the Safe and Secure Innovation for Frontier Artificial Intelligence Models Act. Among other things, require that the developer, before beginning to initially train a covered model, as defined, comply with various requirements, including implementing the capability to promptly enact a full shutdown. This article is calling it imputing a kill switch. Then it goes on to talk about a whole bunch of other compliance requirements that the developer is responsible for. So anybody taking any sort of foundation model and then building upon it, training it for other methods, fine-tuning it, it really imputes a liability on the original developer. Why is this such a major issue? Well, first of all, when we think of product development, I would akin that to like a manufacturer of scissors. Is the person manufacturing the scissors responsible for the improper acts of someone utilizing those scissors that would cause other people harm? That's how I read this. And that's kind of what's going on. So if I want to go here on Twitter and look at Jan LeCun, if you don't know who he is, he's like the father of computer vision. He is someone who works for Meta under Mark Zuckerberg and has great thoughts just based on his broad knowledge and experience within artificial intelligence. You know, he's didn't come about it like many of us in recent years. He's been doing this for a long time. And I like his opinion. So he wrote, "Dear Senator Weiner, many Democrats are against your bill, including myself, numerous California academics, and so on and so forth. Most of us are not against AI regulations. I think a lot of people, you know, if you want to go to the tinfoil hat, most science fiction evolution of what AI harm could cause is Skynet. Yeah, we don't want that. Even Elon Musk, who Jan and Elon have been going back and forth, pretty entertaining on Twitter or X, have discussed. So he says, most of us are not against AI regulations. Elon's not either, but regulations should concern the deployment of products, not the process of research and development. One of the reasons for the fast progress of AI over the last decade has been the free exchange of scientific information and open source code. Incredibly important. The open sourceness of the code so people can build upon it, innovate, make it more secure, find really innovative ways to apply these models to other use cases. Like zero-shot applications is when you adapt a model to be used for another thing that really wasn't intended to be used in the first place. So the cascading liability clauses in SB 1047 would make the release of open source code much too risky and essentially impossible. That's what we talked about, to impute a liability on the developers to how other people use it and have to go and perform audits. I mean, it talks about that. Lack of compliance with audits, the developer can lead to potential liability. It's scary. To me, it's incredibly overreaching. Without open source frontier models, the whole ecosystem of AI research labs and startups would all but disappear. Much of the AI industry, AI startups, and the entire research ecosystem entirely rely on open source. FTC Chair Lena Khan has warned of the negative effects of threats to open source AI. This is not a Democrat versus Republican issue. It is not. It is a bipartisan kind of, I don't know if I want to reach too far into the words of common sense, but that's what's at issue is all of this has a big worry. Even Colorado, when they imputed their own regulations around AI, have started to realize the negative effects that it has on business. And when something like this is imputed, then these companies like Meta, who uses my favorite foundation model, Llama, just because it's open source, I can access it pretty easily. It's optimized for my needs, especially their smaller 8 billion parameter model, would then have to look at moving. And that could be an issue for the state of California, who would love a lot of the tax benefits that come from having a business as large as Meta headquartered in their state. So one of the things is Mark Zuckerberg's profound viewpoint on the importance of open source. And he doesn't talk about the altruism, like giving away this very expensive model that took him all this stuff and time and money to train. They're not just giving it away for the hell of it. Like, they're not a cloud computing company, so they don't really need to keep a lot of this close to the vest, and it's not that important to their revenue. But, you know, that we need to train and fine-tune models to still our own models. We need to control our own destiny, not get locked in a closed vendor loop. We need to protect our data. We need a model that is efficient and affordable to run. We'll get back to that one and the importance of open source. And we want to invest in the ecosystem that goes to be the standard for the long term. So people using their model, loving it, finding different use cases for it. It's created by Meta, then in turn loops back around to improve their business. How has this part, we need a model that's efficient and affordable to run, improved because of open source? Well, let's look at NVIDIA and what they did. They were able to optimize their Llama 3.1 model to make what this called like little Minitron model, where it went from 8 billion parameter to, I believe, 4 billion parameters, really shrink it in size, have minimal loss. And it can only be done because NVIDIA taking that open source model with their technology, combining the collaboration and coming out with something that Meta was actually published and proud of. And that's what happens. And if you go on model or the model breakdown on Hugging Face, you'll see different variations of a number of different open source models being fine-tuned, being increased for different use cases. And it's just an exciting time for developers and for businesses to be able to learn from what other individuals are doing and progress the evolution of artificial intelligence. And it's incredibly scary. So just reading the opinion of this article that is published on Unite.ai, understanding the bill. Let's just go over it again. Aims to regulate the development and deployment of AI technologies within the state. The bill was introduced in response to growing concerns about the ethical use of AI and the potential risks poses to privacy, security, and employment. I think we all have that same concern. Lawmakers behind SB 1047 argue that these regulations are necessary. Arguable. You know, I always find it fascinating when you're talking in the area of science and regulations, because us as citizens, when we're electing congressional or Senate officials, we, make our decision based on any number of things, whether we just like them. Are they someone like we could have a beer with? Do we like their viewpoints on one subject matter? But the area of science has always been a troublesome area of regulation and law, especially like coming from a patent background, is that we have a lot of these individuals wanting to impute their opinion in the field of science where really their education experience doesn't belong. It's that Dunning-Kruger effect. They become overconfident in their competency within the subject matter, and they don't really see the overall effects of what they're doing. This is why I love the fact, like, if I go back to this article of open source, that someone like Mark Zuckerberg sits at the top of this organization to understand the corporate and business strategy from a developer or engineer's perspective. Because it is so easy to be like, hey, we're developing this really valuable thing and we really want to keep it for us. It'll be good for business if no one else has it. But because he understands how things are developed, the evolution of things, he's able to understand that like releasing it open source is actually a benefit for the developer community, which then in turn benefits Meta. I mean, I'm not a Facebook user myself. I use Instagram, but in, some of their products like Oculus and whatnot, not really a fan of, but I am a fan of what the Meta AI researcher Fair is doing in this space. Same with Elon. Like I find it incredibly fascinating to do like a study of how Elon runs his businesses. Like everyone needs to have an engineering perspective, not only just business, engineering perspective, in order to fully understand the ramifications of business decisions to the engineering of what products or any sort of solutions that they're coming up with. And that is missing from the area of law. Like how far overreaching? What are the downstream effects? So when you're studying law, there is kind of the history, like how did a law or regulation get enacted? Here's the theory. Here's how we theorize something like this could be applied and why we're going to apply it and what we're trying to protect. And then you have the actual application. This is brand new. We don't really have the application of this yet to understand what in reality this will do to innovation, business, and the progression of artificial intelligence in the state of California. We can only make some common sense deductions from what this could be. And again, it's kind of like a bipartisan thing. This is a threat. This is not a Democratic or Republican issue. It is a threat to the innovation and the progression of science and research and development and the sharing of ideas. It is kind of like the perverse incentive, or what is like the Cobra philosophy of business, where it is not like the intent of what's being imputed into the world is opposite from reality. So whereas we want to protect the citizens, we're actually going to protect them in a way where there's lack of innovation and progress, because all these companies are now going to have to be really mindful of the potential liability they have for people taking their models. Again, it's hard to kind of objectively provide a narrative around what California is doing around SB 1047 without having some sort of opinion of it. In my opinion, it is not political. Just want to keep that in mind. It is all about the progression of science and the downstream effects. Like, I don't think the individuals who are writing something like this, understanding, what are the downstream effects and empathize with engineers, developers, really truly understand what's going on. So we'll see what comes about it. I think there's going to be enough people, especially someone like Jan LeCun. Haven't heard Mark Zuckerberg talk on it. A number of, Silicon Valley. Like if we think about the progression of innovation in tech companies, they're sitting in the state of California, and this is adverse to their business interests and innovation interest. So guess we'll see.